What's going on, everyone? What you're seeing on the screen right now are the odds for who will land Russell Westbrook if he is traded from the Lakers. This doesn't mean that he's going to leave the Lakers. It's just the odds that the sports books have based on who will likely end up with Westbrook if he is to be traded from the Lakers. So the top three are the Indiana Pacers, the New York Knicks, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The next two are the Houston Rockets and Detroit Pistons. So I wanted to break down each one of these teams and talk about what a potential package would look like with Russell Westbrook being traded to these teams and what the Lakers would receive in return. So we're going to go in order. So starting right off, because let's just get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. You have the Indiana Pacers trade, right? That's the whole thing. I mean, that's been the whole speculations. I'm surprised the Charlotte Hornets aren't here as well, because that was the other big one. It was like, which package is better, Indiana or Charlotte? So I think that that's fascinating that they don't have Charlotte even anywhere on this list. But the Indiana Pacers trade is pretty straightforward, right? You got Brogdon, Buddy Hield for Russell Westbrook. Indiana is in a rebuilding stage, right? They've traded away all their core. They got Halliburton, who they're likely going to build around. And luckily, he is a guy that can play both positions. He can play the one, he can play the two. So you can kind of let Westbrook come in and, maybe be competitive, whatever. You can always trade Westbrook or, it's more about the expiring contract. And that's the big thing. Because I've seen people, like, I made a video the other day talking about Westbrook trade, and people are like, why would anyone want Westbrook? Like, nobody's going to trade for Westbrook. Not true. A lot of teams would take Russell Westbrook, especially at the trade deadline. That's something else you got to keep in mind, because he is an expiring contract. So there are teams out there that may think they're contenders and end up, going through the season and realize they're not even going to make the play-in and are like, hey, let's unload some contracts and make the trade for Westbrook. You got other teams that, they're just rebuilding. They're like, hey, we could get a draft pick. We could get something to kind of help the rebuild. We'll take on Westbrook, unload some of our bad contracts. There is a ton of value in Westbrook's contract, whether you want to believe it or not. But this trade, I think, is a reasonable trade. I mean, you got Hield, who the Lakers really wanted. The Lakers tried to get in the offseason, but then they ended up getting Westbrook, which would be kind of funny. And then Brogdon is he is like the stereotypical perfect type of point guard for a LeBron James team. A guy that can play defense, a guy that can knock down threes. He's going to be the best Brogdon we have ever seen with LeBron. The problem is his injury concerns. He is very unreliable lately. And if he can stay healthy and he can get healthy, he is a great piece for the Lakers, as is Buddy Hield. He's a guy that can get scorching hot, lights out shooting. It's somebody that would be perfect next to LeBron. This would be a great, acquisition for the Lakers. And it's great for the Indiana Pacers because they unload two big contracts. They take on Westbrook. It's money off the books at the end of the year, or you can buy him out, or you could do whatever. It doesn't matter. You have options there. But ultimately, this would be probably one of the best trades for Russell Westbrook. You get two quality guys, so you're adding depth, which is a big concern. But beyond adding depth, you're adding guys that can actually contribute and do things that the Lakers really needed last year. But moving on, the New York Knicks trade, right? This is basically the trade that was talked about, months ago, where you have Alex Burke, Evan Fournier, and then Cam Reddish, because Thibodeau and the New York Knicks apparently didn't really want him. And you have to make salaries match, things like that. And so you're unloading, two big contracts. Maybe the Lakers give up a draft pick or two on top of, Westbrook. There's the possibility maybe they throw in like a player, something along those lines, and you get these guys. This isn't a bad trade. I mean, I actually think the Hield and Brogdon trade is better than this, but you get a defensive 3-and-D wing and Alec Burke, who can help you now. He can fill in a spot. He can guard multiple positions, things like that. He can knock down shots, though he's kind of hot and cold. Evan Fournier, he's a guy that, a year or two ago was averaging 18, 20 points a game. And, he's a guy that can, again, get hot, knock down shots from the perimeter. He'd be a solid pickup, a solid role player, especially next to LeBron James. Cam Reddish is a young guy who many people had a lot of promise for, and he hasn't really lived up to that promise. But I think that this would be an incredible pickup for the Lakers. Like, this would be where the value is in Cam Reddish. Because if he becomes anything like the player that he was projected to be, then Lakers got a real steal. I mean, if he can develop into that, small forward, power forward type of player, play multiple positions, guard multiple positions, give you 15 to 18 points a game. I mean, that's a really good pickup. But the other thing, too, is New York is the type of team that would trade for Russell Westbrook just so that way they have ticket sales. They have a star for a year, stuff like that. You have $44 million come off the books. Maybe you can go and try to get another star or two, something along those lines. You unload these contracts. It makes the world of sense for the New York Knicks. That's why I think that they were sort of the number one team for so long as to the team that would take on Westbrook, because it's something New York would do. It's something that could benefit New York on and off the court as far as like business wise. And at the end of the day, you knock off $47 million that really, helps for your future. And you unload some players, one that you didn't even want, and two players that have some pretty sizable contracts for multiple years. It puts New York in a really good position. Lakers, again, they get depth. They get some role players, which they really need. I don't think the Lakers are a contender with these three. I mean, I don't really think they're a contender with Brogdon or Buddy Hield regardless. And, I mean, I personally think if this is your trade, yeah, I would rather just keep Westbrook, right? Because Westbrook expires. You can kind of, get maybe another free agent or another star to come in. And there's a lot of talks of the Lakers keeping them. But I don't know. We'll see what develops. Next up is Oklahoma City Thunder. This one I think is the least likely trade to happen. Not because the OKC wouldn't take Westbrook. I think that they would, especially Sam Presti. He loves to stock up on draft picks and stuff like that. So he would take on Westbrook for a year to clear him off the books. Westbrook, home is OKC, right? That's where he was drafted. That's where he played for so many years. But it's about the return. The return is Derek Favors and Mike Muscala, who he was on the Lakers for like 4 games or something like that. But these guys, they don't help you in any way. And their contracts that like you take on, yeah, you could cut them. Yeah, you could trim salary, but OKC is not going to take Westbrook on unless you're giving up a draft pick. And if you're going to make that trade, I would rather you just, go get role players. Go get the Indiana trade. Go get even the New York trade. I think all of those trades are better. In my opinion, the Oklahoma City trade would be the worst trade on the table. Unless you can get some benefit, There's a lot of questions about Sean Gilgeous-Alexander, which I don't think OKC is going to trade, but there's a lot of talks that they might, especially with the draft position that they have this year. If there's a way that maybe you give up a THT, give up a couple draft picks, maybe you go get that guy that can kind of be like your third guy, then maybe there's something there, but I don't think that would ever happen if we're being honest and we're being realistic here. And so I don't think the OKC trade makes any sense for the Lakers. If this is your option from OKC, I think you just keep Westbrook, because all you're doing is just getting 2 big guys that aren't going to really help you at all, are probably the worst options out of everybody. It doesn't make sense to me. So I don't see the OKC trade happening at all unless there's, some significance added or a third team. Like OKC maybe can navigate a 3-team trade. Maybe another team doesn't want to take on Westbrook, but they'll take on Derek Favors and Mike Muscala because they need some bigs, they need some depth, something like that. Maybe if you can work out a 3-team trade, I could see that happening, and Lakers get some pieces, to help round out their team, their roster, maybe. But this trade, I don't think is realistic. But the Houston Rockets, that was the other big one, right? Swapping John Wall for Russell Westbrook. And Christian Wood is on here because that was the big trade. There was tons of talks that Christian Wood would be included, that the Lakers actually turned down a trade for John Wall and Christian Wood for, I believe it was THT, Russell Westbrook, and I think 2 first-round draft picks, and the Lakers denied it, which I think is a little silly. I mean, John Wall is basically the same thing as Russell Westbrook contract-wise. John Wall might be a little better fit. So, I mean, if you're going to keep Westbrook, I think you're better off taking on John Wall. But the big thing would be getting Christian Wood, a guy that could play the 4 and the 5. Anthony Davis is going to be out, 20 plus games every season. So if you have Christian Wood, you're not really losing that big, starting caliber player. I would be really interesting to see him and Anthony Davis playing together, running the double bigs. I think that would be great. They can both shoot from the outside. They both can, get down low. They can both score. I think there's a ton of benefit in getting Christian Wood. I would love to see Christian Wood on the Lakers with the roster that they have, especially LeBron having those 2 bigs. And it kind of gets back to what the Lakers were successful at when they won the championship. Those big bodies, those guys that could guard multiple positions, those guys that can, alternate and give a DRS, stuff like that. I think that this would be a great trade. I'm actually shocked the Lakers didn't do that, but I think that they were looking for like, hey, we'll have a lot more options in the offseason. I could see if push comes to shove and there aren't a lot of offers on the table, this could be a trade that's revisited and we could see happening. Especially, again, the Rockets' draft position. I think that, that it's very likely that Christian Wood could be expendable depending on where the chips fall. But also there was a lot of drama with Christian Wood, right? Him and Porter Jr., like they had some real issues. And I just think that it's very likely that they could end up trading him. And there you go. So I do think that this is a pretty solid trade. I don't think it makes the Lakers contenders. But I don't think any trade you're going to get for Westbrook is going to make him a contender at this point. But now it's just like, what kind of pieces can we get to be at least competitive, at least make the playoffs? You get into the playoffs, who knows? Maybe LeBron can kind of light that fire one more time. You got LeBron and Anthony Davis. If they're healthy, you never know. I mean, we saw the Western Conference this year, and it wasn't as good as people thought. Like, no team was really, this world beater. Everyone was equally kind of bad in many ways. I mean, the Warriors were clearly, or looked to be clearly, the best team. So I think the only thing you're really competing against is that, and size really helps. But lastly is the Detroit Pistons. Jeremy Grant and Olynyk. I don't think that happens. I don't know why the Pistons would want to do that either, especially with Cade Cunningham. I think you want the ball in his hands. You got another good draft pick. You want to draft somebody that you can build around Cade and that new prospect. Also, Jeremy Grant, I think a lot of teams would trade a lot better than Westbrook, if we're being honest, for him. I think he is a guy, he's 6'8", 6'9". He can put up 20 points any given night. He's a guy that is a perfect third option for LeBron and Davis. I mean, if there's a way to get this trade, to make this trade happen, I'm doing this immediately. Because you get Jeremy Grant, who can guard multiple positions. Your defense will be better. He's a 3-and-D guy. He's a guy that can be your third option. When LeBron takes a rest, he can be the guy to go out and score. Olynyk, I think, is still a quality big. I don't think he's not a star big or anything like that, but he's a guy that is smart. He plays good. He plays hard. He would be good. I mean, you could even pair him in your backcourt, or in your front court, with Anthony Davis and him. Like, you have options there. I just don't see it. I don't see the Pistons giving up Jeremy Grant for Russell Westbrook, essentially, because they don't have a ton of huge contracts, and so you have to make the contracts match. Unless there's a third team involved, maybe they take on Westbrook, but another team doesn't want Westbrook. So maybe Indiana, maybe Detroit takes on Westbrook, and the Pacers get Grant, and the Lakers end up getting, the two pieces that they want, Brogdon and Buddy Hield. I don't know. I don't see this happening. I think that's why it's at the very bottom of the list. I think that the odds makers were looking like, hey, what are the possible teams that could take on his contract and be okay with it? I mean, Detroit has a ton of salary. They can pretty much almost absorb the entire thing. But, I don't think this happens. I think this one and the OKC one, even though those are two teams that can just pretty much absorb Westbrook head on, I just don't think that those trades make sense. One of them I don't think makes sense for the Lakers. The other one I don't think makes sense for Detroit. Unless they just really want to move on. They want to tank another year and hopefully get a better draft pick. I don't know. That could be an option. But anyway, that being said, there you have the list. There you have the teams and the trades and the potentials. All these trades are based on the rumored trades based on these things. So, it's something that's out there in the ether. It's something out there in the universe. I mean, we'll see what happens. What do you think? Do you think that Westbrook gets traded to any of these teams? Do you think that the Lakers keep Westbrook? Word is that the Lakers are keeping Westbrook. There was even a report today over on Bleacher Report talking about how the Lakers have told everybody, we're keeping Westbrook unless we don't have to give up draft picks, which I think is silly. Who cares about the 27th, the year 27 draft pick? You're talking about guys that, are in middle school right now. The whole goal isn't to be tanking to go get a quality draft pick back then. The goal is you're the Los Angeles Lakers. You replenish, you don't rebuild, right? That was their mantra, back in 2004, stuff like that. Like, what happened to that? I think that if you can get some quality guys, you can get 2 or 3 pieces that can contribute and actually be solid. I think that's the best trade for you. I mean, I don't think it makes you a contender, but I think it's the best trade for you, and kind of let the cards hit the table and see where they fall. But let me know what you think. What do you think about Westbrook? Do you think he stays? Do you think he goes? Which team do you think he goes to? What do you think about these trades? Do you think any of them sound ridiculous? Do you think any of them make sense for both sides? All those things I'd love to hear down in the comment section below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports, join this wonderful community, and all of our discussions. See you all in the next one. Thank you.